Hey guys, welcome Muskie Road Rules Podcast, episode number 242. It is 242 because I looked back and my numbers were of course wrong, but it is 242 this time. Guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend. Thanks for telling people you don't like. I don't care. As long as you download and you listen to us every week, we'll be talking muskies right here with somebody that knows what they're doing. So that means I don't talk very much. Guys, today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Tackle. Clearly the leader. Guys, if you're looking for a good leader, whether it be fluorocarbon, whether it be stranded, whether it be straight wire, or any of the components, the Staylock snaps, or my personal favorite for the trolling leaders, the Fast Hatch snaps, check out stealthtackle.net. Also, don't forget about the One-Eyed Willie. We're in summer right now, and it is topwater season. If you like walk the dog baits, check out. Got both sizes, the 6 and 8 inch models. But go to stealthtackle.net and see what they got. We've also, remember to text us on our Lungin Lures text line, which is, let's use the old number this time. The old number. We're going to go old school here. Lungin Lures text line 606-776-6570. Text Tony. Let him know. Tony's probably asleep right now. Guys, it is 7, let's see what time it is. It is 7:15 in the morning. We're usually doing these at night, and I'm usually drinking something other than coffee. And, yeah, so this is a little early. I had to get up early this morning to do this because we've got a special guest. First time on the podcast, Mr. Joe Cooper from up here at the Northwest Angle, where I am on Lake of the Woods. I'm up at the cabin. I'm looking outside. I see pine trees. I had a bulldog pee in the bed this morning, which was not the most pleasant thing to wake up to. And, yeah, you might hear them sometime. But, Joe, how you doing this morning?
Doing great. Great. Getting geared up for today. It's looking good.
Did you have a bulldog pee in the bed this morning?
No, but I had a hellhound pee in the bed there. I don't have any bulldogs out yet this season.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good. Mine barks, weighs about 40 pounds, looks at me, burps, farts, and apparently pees everywhere. That's what I've been dealing with all morning. But Joe,
mine's got a half a tail and no hooks. So
I got plenty like that too. What, Joe? So, what's your first time on the podcast? What? Tell everybody kind of what's your story. How did you get into muskie fishing, and especially up here at the Northwest Angle, where I think you spend your whole season, don't you?
Yeah. This is where I've lived and my whole life. Well, not right here at the Angle. I grew up in Badette on the Rainy River there. My parents operated a seaplane service out of the Rainy River. Spent a lot of time at the Angle growing up, flying around in the plane with my dad, and kind of always knew I wanted to be here. Probably planned on going and getting a real job, making some money before I came up and started guiding. That didn't really happen, and I've been here since 2009. Probably really didn't start guiding full time till about 2011, and yeah, I started muskie fishing, I suppose, probably trying a few times when I was a bit younger, but I'd say I really didn't get a lot of my gear and stuff until about when I moved up to the Angle here, like 2009. I just, doing what I did, didn't really have the funding to go out and get muskie gear when I wasn't doing it a whole lot. Once I got the chance to get a bunch of muskie gear, I started doing that, and I suppose was targeting muskie clientele for a long time. Of course, on Lake of the Woods here, the walleyes are kind of the bread and butter as far as guiding. So, starting out, had a lot of walleye days, doing shore lunch and stuff every day. That's just kind of the way you got to do it starting out, and started getting more muskie clientele. And when Doug Johnson retired, he sent a lot of his clientele over my way. So that really kicked off my muskie guiding. And ever since then, I suppose, been majority majority of guide days throughout the season are muskies, and it's awesome. I love it. Lake of the Woods is my passion. It's kind of a contagious, I think. When people are fishing with me, I just love this lake. I love, learning every day, and this is probably one of the best places in the world to be out there every day and still learn something every time you're out. So I think if you're not learning something every time you're out there, you're probably not doing it right.
Yeah,
But,
well, I mean, I tell you, the thing about the woods, and I'm sure you're the same way. I mean, you fish it. You fish new spots every day. I don't think you can actually fish every spot on this lake. The one thing out there while I'm fishing, everybody's like, "Well, everything looks good." I go, "I know, it's it probably is good at some time."
that's the thing. Yeah, it's overwhelming.
It is. It is very overwhelming, especially someone like me that believes in better living through chemistry, and I got to take an extra pill in the morning because it does get it does frazzle the mind a little bit when you're out there. But Joe, so you got started. Now, did you know Doug very well?
Honestly, I mean, I knew who he was. Hadn't ever really spoke with him, or I don't know if he sent a couple scouts my way or what. But he knew who I was. I knew who he was. I was, real busy, and he was too. And so no, I didn't really know him, but it worked out nice.
Yeah, no, Doug was a sweetheart, or is a sweetheart. He's not dead. Doug's a sweetheart. I fished with him 20 years ago up here, and I can gracefully say that we fished 3 days, and I was really young and really excited, and I got a good learning experience because we didn't catch any for 3 days. And oh yeah, but I had a blast. Doug is he's just a sweet man, and he had one fish hit a 10-inch believer at the boat, probably like a 45-incher, and but he has always been a really, really nice guy to me. He lives now just down the creek from me, and kind of across the creek from you, if I think right.
Something like that. Yep.
And I know he's given it up. I think he's 84 now, and forgotten more than I'll probably ever know. And I know he's looking at selling his place up here on the Angle, and I think he might actually have a buyer for it.
Yeah, I think it's a done deal.
I can't say who just yet.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing and everything, and that's cool. I'm glad Doug was able to pass that off and get you some musky guys, some more musky guys and stuff. I know it's always nice to get some hardcore guys in the boat that are willing to go out there and deal with the grind. And
he got them all trained in for me and made it easy on my end. So yeah, he's absolute wealth of knowledge, and the spots that we're fishing, he was out there, feeling them out well before anybody else was. So
he raised them. He
did. Trained them. Trained them. Those are the ones that won't bite.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way to look at it. But Joe, let's talk here a little bit. The one thing I know that you like to do and you've done a lot of in the past is some crankbait stuff. And when people think of Canada, crankbaits are something that a lot of guys don't think of. It's more of a bucktail topwater thing. And, the crankbait stuff really isn't that big a deal. Now, I personally like throwing twitch baits, and a shallow invader is one of my favorite baits, and it's something I give to a lot of clients because it's super versatile and they catch fish. But let's talk a little bit about maybe some of your techniques or some of the things that you're doing that help you put some fish in the boat. What are you looking for in a crankbait when you're up here in Canada?
Well, I'm looking for something that is definitely a durable bait, something with a strong lip. You know, you're grinding it over rocks. That's one of my favorite things about crankbaits is you can really feel these spots out, and just find, little shelves and things that are out in front of you that you would never know about without them. And so I'm definitely grinding rocks here and there. Things like crane baits and big games. They're great baits that catch fish, but they just have a lifespan on the lake here when you're grinding them into the rocks and everything. So when it comes to crankbaits, like jakes, 8-inch and 10-inch jakes are really one of my favorites, I think, and grandmas, like the 9-inch grandmas, stuff like that. Probably throw stuff like that around more than anything. As far as a crankbait, super shad wrap is, of course, something that I've always talked about. I love throwing super shads. That's just a overlooked lure by a lot of guys. I've been telling guys in the past, yeah, we're nailing them on super shads, and they were thinking that I was telling them that so I didn't have to tell them what I was actually catching my fish on, and they're like, well, I just feel like I'm not doing anything when I'm throwing this around. I'm like, well, that's what's so great about it. And
it doesn't have to hurt all the time.
Yeah, you don't have to go home more exhausted than you were when you show up. I mean, that's probably going to happen no matter what, I guess, because you feel like you can't miss 1 second out there. But that's just another, real durable lure that, of course, a lot of times you can kind of pull that lip off right when you take it out of the box, but you super glue it back on there, and that thing will go until it's in wood chips. But I like rattles too. That's another thing that I really. Of course, Super Shad doesn't have that, but having a rattle in a bait, I think fish here on Lake of the Woods really like that. And yeah, I mean I'm just looking for something that has. I don't throw too many that suspend. Most of them are floaters. A lot of times kind of blow that float down a little bit. Maybe put some bigger hooks on, or possibly even a little weight on the bottom, try and slow the rise down, but good to have them float up. So, yeah, I guess, I don't know
so you're looking for
what I'm looking for.
You're looking for something that has a pretty good size, lip on it. Have you played much with the metal lip baits?
Yeah, a little bit here and there. The thing with a lot of those metal lip baits, I guess when you do that float, they'll really, with the ass end up, they'll kind of be floating up vertical, and it's just not quite as appealing, I think, as something that is coming up horizontally. Of course, I suppose you could try and counterweight it and stuff like that, but yeah, I mean, there's a few baits I throw with some metal lips.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, these, so you're fishing these things on the rock and going back to like some of the guys that fished up here in the past, Pearson, Johnson, and them, they threw a lot of believers, and the swim whiz style baits. Those baits there, they had a molded in lip that was actually just molded part of the body. And do you think, or have you tried those? Is that because those, the one thing with those baits is that probably if the lip breaks, the whole head of the bait came off. And I
don't think I've ever even seen a broken believer. Those things are about as they're about as durable as they come. I throw them. I throw them a bit here and there. To be honest, I probably should throw them quite a bit more. I think that. I guess I just built my confidence up on some other baits, more so than the believer, and over time have just kind of, started not using it as much. Probably a mistake, I guess, on my part, not doing that. I probably should get a few more back in the boat and start chucking them around a bit more. But yeah, I mean, the believer's no doubt a fish catcher that is about as durable as they come. So.
Sure. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, you're a shad wrap guy. The guys out on Green Bay are big shad wrap fishermen. They've caught some huge fish out there on the super shads, trolling out in the bay. And it seems like that bait, like you said, it's kind of an underused bait in the muskie world because I think it's not it doesn't have the $50 paint job on it. It's kind of just a mass produced lure.
Yeah,
and
it's too expensive. Or it's too cheap to be a muskie bait.
It's too cheap to be a muskie bait. Yes, you can afford to buy a pop afterwards. It's it's way too cheap, and so I mean that's something that I find interesting because I down south we used to fish a lot of shad raps, and again it's like anything. I think once you fish something for a while and then you find something new, you kind of forget about what used to work for you. And I think that's just like an evolution in fishing. And the shad raps, so one thing that up here, I think when you're fishing the rocks, you've kind of alluded to it. When you're fishing cranks up here, is it mostly rock fishing or are you doing much in the weeds?
I'll definitely, keep it on sometimes if we come through some weeds, sandy bay with some weeds or something like that, and just slow things down, kind of. Obviously you don't want to throw it way back into them.
I enjoy that. I love to see what we can get. I want to see Cousin It just running in right behind my bait.
Well, I've definitely seen plenty of fish come in and crush a crankbait with like 4 feet of weeds dragging behind it. Even in the figure 8, I've seen that a few times.
Well, they're mad their home is leaving. They're wondering.
That's what I always say. Hey, that's where I live. Come back, And but it's all about just kind of, especially with the weed line and stuff, you can throw a crankbait out, twitch it through that weed edge, and when you get outside of the weeds, you can let it float up and sometimes even sit there for longer than you'd think, and a fish will come up and grab it. So they're definitely something that can be used all over. I mean, a lot of times we got a guy throwing crankbait, and we get to a weedy bay, and he goes, well, do you want me to put something else on? I said, no, just slow it down, and it works out. So it's not just a rock bait, and sand too, even if it's just bare sand, no weeds. Sometimes kind of grinding that crankbait through the sand a little bit gets a bite. I don't know what, something kicking up a dust cloud like that seems to kind of like it, but
yeah, no, we at Mille Lacs in the early 2000s when I was there, and the sand bite on the north end was a big thing. It was me, Hammernick, Luke, Ron Strand and stuff. We were up there, and we had Mean Gene, the trolling machine, up there in the pontoons, and that's what he ran was the super shads, and he would just dig those things into the sand. And was catching fish, and I myself, we casted them and we did some digging with them too. I trolled a little bit with them, and those and little 5-inch Wileys, and caught fish. And it seems like that dust trail that just as it went through the sand was cool. The only thing we caught up there, we had contests as well, is how many snails we could get on our hooks. Because there's a lot of snails up there. No, digging something into the bottom, in sand, we do that in the spring down at Cave Run with rattle baits and stuff, and so I'm a big believer in that. So that's a great technique. Now I'm not familiar with rock and stuff, as familiar with rock, especially down south and everything like what's up here. There's literally rock everywhere, and
a lot of rock.
A lot of rock. Very hard if you have to make a deposit to find where to pull up on the island. It's one of those deals, but lots of rock. So let me ask you this: when you're fishing and you're doing the crankbait thing, is position in the boat, like who throws it, is that important to you? Like, is it the first guy? Is it the last guy? Middle guy? Is that something you look for?
Well, if we're throwing a variety of baits, if somebody's throwing a bucktail, that's always good to have up front. I guess one thing I like with crankbaits is giving it a long pause before you come into the figure 8. And if you got somebody in the front doing that, that has something that's maybe moving a little faster right behind them, then, they're kind of mucking things up in the figure eight. That crankbait will like kind of drift back into the next guy's area there. So, but it's, I guess, that's the only thing that would make me decide to who to have throwing a crankbait is just basically if there's a bucktail or a top water or something in front of it that you kind of want to keep moving, then
Sure.
then I put that, but otherwise there's a lot of times we'll all three be throwing crankbaits or I'm not kind of putting somebody in a certain spot just because they're throwing a crankbait. Sometimes guys are comfortable where they're at in the boat too. So
Sure. So what is? Let's talk about your retrieve. Let's say what would be your, because you mentioned the pause right under the boat and everything. I just found a toenail on the floor. That is disgusting.
Might just be an onion.
It could. Well, I put it in my mouth. It's definitely toenail.
Okay.
That I have to make sure. That's how
Good test.
Yeah, that's the way I test everything.
Yeah.
I give it the taste test. That's the first and the only official one. That's NASA. Most of the scientific community believe in that one.
It's a great way to learn.
It is, Bill.
Yeah, sometimes you're going to learn the hard way, but that's life.
That is, you know what? That is the mantra Bill Nye, the science guy, has said for many a year. So let's talk about this retrieve now, because you'd mentioned the pause before the figure eight. Let's talk about, what would you consider when you hand somebody the rod? I'm Joe, no fish crankbait man, and you hand me the rod, and I throw it out there, and what would you tell me?
A great way to kind of start things out, I guess. You, like I said, throwing over rocks. You don't want to be ripping that bait into the rocks hard. So a lot of times we're casting out, and that first half of the retrieve will be like just straight reel on that first half of the retrieve. Get the bait down there, let it tickle its way through the rocks. As you're coming off the shelf, getting closer to the boat, you can start giving it some pull and pause. Give it a rip and pause, and and there's times where they prefer just a straight retrieve all the way back, and then there's times where they seem to really go after that rip and pause, especially later in the season. But typically I'd say straight retrieve first half of the cast. Second half you can start doing some rip and pause. Once you get maybe about 8-10 feet from the boat, I really like to do a long pause, let it float all the way up. And it's one thing about the crankbaits, if you're reeling it all the way to the boat and just reeling it straight into your eight, the fish are going to kind of come up underneath the boat because that crankbait hits the deepest part of the retrieve just before it starts coming up towards the boat. So it's coming up hard, and even something that's a little shallower sometimes, if it's just out of sight, the fish are coming up underneath and you just don't see them. So I either try and pause it, let it float up, or I'll kind of give it an up snap, kind of in a quick lift towards the surface. As it's getting closer, as you can feel that line start to pull more down than out, bringing it up quick. And then, there's times that I would do the pause and rise, and the fish would pass it up. They'd be hot on it, and you'd stop that lure, and they'd come shooting past it. So to kind of deal with that, I guess a lot of times I'll do a quick rip, a quick lift into the dead rise, and that kind of solves that issue where if there's one tailing 1 inch behind it and you give it that rip, they'll jump on it there. That kind of keeps them from passing it up on the rise. But that dead rise, especially like this time of year, not long after spawn and everything, they really are interested in that float. And there's times that the lure's coming up to the surface and the fish is nosing up behind it, and as long as that fish is still nose up towards the lure, I just keep letting it float and keep letting it sit there. And it kind of goes against your musky fishing instincts to not keep it moving when you see a fish coming up behind it. when I'm telling guys about this, it's like having a lab next to you when you got a tennis ball in your hand. I'm like, don't move it, don't move it. And they're just, oh, it takes everything they got to not do something with that bait. But it's, it's a underutilized technique that is very deadly. And there's times that bait will be just sitting on the surface for, 3-5 seconds, maybe more, and that fish is just slowly coming up behind it. And you'd think that it'd be a real light little nip when they decide to eat it like that. But there's a lot of times it's a violent strike, and it's a big swoop slurp strike that, you watch them come up, grab it, and as they make their turn back down, lean back on the rod and it sets the hook right into it's perfect, so it definitely takes a few encounters to really see how it works before you can build some confidence not moving your lure. But it's a deadly little maneuver there that I don't know if that's kind of a thing that is special on Lake of the Woods or if that's something that can be done a lot of places. I haven't musky fished a whole lot of other. I haven't spent time musky fishing on a whole lot of other lakes, but I know that is a little maneuver that works great here all season long. So.
Well, that's interesting. That's something I've never seen before, and I can't wait because I know I will screw it up. The first the few times it happens. So basically, what you're doing is you're convincing guys to and talking guys into. And I know that's got to be hard because I know when the guys are sitting there and they see this fish come and they're like, hey, what? And this thing that it's floating up. So you're letting this bait float all the way to the surface. Maybe like how far out?
Well, you want it far enough out that you still got some a little bit of line left to retrieve before you get your eight. So if the fish doesn't eat it on that long pause, maybe you can just give it a couple twitch, another pause, give it the lure a little bit of action before you get to your eight. But you also want the lure to be close enough so that you can see behind and underneath it. So that's just kind of takes a little bit of practice to find out when you want to do it. But when you feel that line starting to pull harder as the bait is coming in, you know that you're getting down to the deepest part of your retrieve and it's going to start coming up. And you want to make sure you can see behind and underneath it. And you're going to see the white on their chin, or even when they're kind of yawning at it a little bit, you'll see their mouth open up, and a lot of times you really can't see much else besides maybe the lips opening up or the underside of their chin. But you want to make sure that it's close enough you can see behind and underneath, but far enough away you have a little bit of time to give the lure some action before you get to your eight.
Well, that's so 10 to 15 feet out.
I'd say so. Like about where, if you were to just unhook the lure from your rod and let it swing out, that's kind of a good range. I mean, if you're throwing a 9-foot rod or whatever, that's kind of a pretty good area there. It's and of course it kind of is different with different lures too, I guess. But the main thing is you want to be able to see behind and underneath it. So, and you don't want to do it right next to the boat. It's you're kind of doing it to see that fish before it comes up underneath your feet. So
sure.
That's
Well, that's a pretty interesting technique. I don't think I've ever heard of that much. Now, you had mentioned that. Does it work? Does it seem to work better after spawn when the fish are a little more beat up and they're like chilling, having a cigarette and stuff? Or is it something that you've seen work all year?
It's an all year thing. That's
wow.
There's definitely points of the season where they're not necessarily eating on that real long pause where the lures come up to the surface and just sitting there. That's kind of, I think, more of an early season thing, but it's a great way to be seeing fish all season long. I mean, it's definitely effective throughout the entire year. So,
yeah. Well, that's pretty neat. Now, besides the Shad Rap, you mentioned the grandmas, the flat-sided baits. Do you like the flatter-sided baits more than you do like say something like a depth raider, or the more round, or like a big Ernie, something like that, a rounder body?
I think that it's more so the fish on Lake of the Woods kind of prefer those flat-sided baits. And I think also that a lot of the flat-sided baits maybe are a little more durable sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that where the lip comes into the body of the bait is a lot of times got a little better anchor than some of those shad-shaped baits where the lip comes in is kind of a thin spot on the body.
Sure.
Yeah, so.
What about, you haven't mentioned anything about color. I mean, does color make a difference to you, or do you think it's just the bait hitting the rock and making kind of getting the fish's attention versus color?
Well, I don't get really picky about subtle changes in color. Basically looking at like real bright, kind of like a fire tiger, chartreuse fire tiger, orange fire tiger, or some natural walleye. Walleye crankbaits are probably some of my favorite patterns to throw, but like my number one lure for a long time probably still is the green fire tiger super shad. All year long, right from beginning to end. And, we got kind of stained water around the angle, so that could be definitely why I like the brighter colors. Helps you see the bait and everything. But I think that I kind of like natural colors later in the season,
Mm-hmm.
and bright colors throughout the majority of the summer.
Okay. Have you noticed like size being a big thing? I mean, I know you're throwing you said you like the super shads, and that's a small bait. I mean, what are those, 5.5, 6 inches?
Something like that.
They're not.
Yep.
They're not very big. But I mean, do you go later in the year? Or early in the year? Doesn't matter. Go to like the 10-inch Jake or the 9-inch grandma, or do you do those early as well?
I'll do those early as well. There's a lot of times I'll start out the season with a 10-inch Jake. I really love 10-inch Jakes. I think the 8-inch Jake is maybe a little more versatile as far as throwing it over different types of structure and stuff like that. So I guess I probably throw like the 8-inch and 6-inch cranks probably a little bit more throughout the season, but the 10-inchers are not to be overlooked. Definitely, it's not something that I just I try both out, and if we start seeing some action on one of them, then that's kind of where it ends up. So
sure. Well, that's pretty cool, man. I really like kind of some new techniques and stuff like that, and what you're saying now has got me really thinking. What about tape? Huh?
Well, I have fished with a lot of musky guys that, I give them a crankbait and they go, man, I just don't really throw crankbaits. Like I don't have much confidence with a crankbait, and I'm like, well, you will by the end of today. It's just something that I've always loved throwing, no matter what I'm fishing for. And yeah, I hear a lot of very experienced musky anglers say the same things you've just said. Like it's just something different. And I don't know. I mean, I haven't really fished a lot of other places with a lot of other guys. Growing up on the lake here, I just went out and kind of started doing things on my own a lot of the time. And it's just kind of evolved into some of these things that I like to do with the baits. So,
well, that's a good thing. I mean, I grew up fishing a lot of crankbaits down south. I mean, in Kentucky, bass country, we have a lot of timber. So, big build crankbaits rolled through the trees was kind of like, that's what you did.
Yep.
So we fish a lot of crankbaits down south. I'm a big troller as well. I spend a lot of my time. I always try to find a trolling and a casting bite. So it's something I've done a lot of. But when you think up north traditional muskie fishing, it's a bucktail and a topwater and a jerkbait. So the crankbait thing I think is really really kind of unique, and it's kind of fun to know that's out there. And
great hookup percentage on crankbaits too. That's one of the great things about them is that's not a lot of fish that are going to eat a crankbait and come off.
Yeah,
so.
No, I definitely agree with you there. The other thing it's nice is when you're doing it the way that you did, and it's also a way that I kind of approach tournaments sometimes, and as I get older, I've done it. Go out and try your stuff first, and learn it a little more on your own. That way you don't have any preloaded knowledge of like, well, this ain't going to work.
Absolutely. There's guys that come up here and they don't know what's, right or wrong, and I'm using quotations when I say that. There really is no right or wrong when you're fishing, I think. But when guys come up and they, when there's anglers, guides that are here all the time, they look at this structure or location and they're like, no, there's just nothing there. That's not what we want to do this time of year. And somebody that comes up and has no prior knowledge as that stuff goes out and they'll uncover something that the guys that are here all the time wouldn't even think about doing.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing. We see it in tournaments all the time. Yeah. And I've always loved tournaments. I'm a big believer in tournaments because of that thing. Guys are like, well, don't you, isn't it embarrassing to get beat? No, it's muskie fishing. You get beat all the time.
Man, that's absolutely, I fished that one tournament over on the east side of the lake, the Nestor Falls Muskie Cup. I just love that. I love that tournament. It's kind of an end of the season get together for a lot of guys that I see on the water throughout the entire year. And I have just as much fun on the years that we have not landed a fish during the tournament as I do on the year that we won it, the years that we've ended up top three. Like, it's just, you're nothing's better than drinking whiskey and talking muskies with a bunch of goons, and then putting some money on the line. And what I think is probably the most epic trophy in fishing, just adds to it. So
yeah, that sounds like my friend base.
Yeah, and you can't get hurt when it doesn't work out. There's guys that, could be their first time on Lake of the Woods and they go out there and beat you. And
trust me, I've fished a lot of tournaments over the years, and some with success, some with not, and it, you learn a lot from whatever. Sometimes the guy who, I've always hated the expression, well, that doesn't work here, because that is the biggest bunch of crap I've ever seen. A good friend of mine, Dale Wiley, that makes the Wiley lures. Dale and his partner Todd Young started out. I met him fishing the PMTT, and his lures have become, staples in my boat, especially down in the southern region. And I've actually caught fish on them everywhere. But he developed a bait for his type of fishing, and his type of fishing was trolling extremely fast. And, that's what he liked to do. That's how he caught fish. He actually, he started out as a caster and just like everybody else, and kind of evolved and came up with this system. And, the reason he does it and likes it is it works. It does something. It catches fish. And, during the PMTT, he'd be traveling with us, and guys would say, oh, well, we don't catch, you can't catch a fish trolling over 3 miles an hour here. And he'd go out and get 2 going 5. And that's, that's something that I've always said is, the whole this doesn't work here is really not, that's just, that's a defeatist attitude.
There's no rules.
No, there isn't. And just because it doesn't work for you, maybe there's a little tweak to it. Maybe you're not using the right bait. Maybe it's a depth thing. Maybe it's a structure thing. But everything does work. It's just it could be a timing thing. You know, I've definitely
or confidence. Even just throwing a bait with confidence will make things happen. You know, and if you're out there like, why am I doing this? This isn't going to work. You're not gonna make it happen. And if you do, you got lucky, I think. And sometimes that's what it takes, is to get lucky, to kind of open your eyes a little bit and show you what you need to do differently.
Sure. No, I totally get that, and that's something that I try to impart. And everything I do is tell guys that, you know, you just got to get out there. You got to have confidence. And, you know, it's definitely be ready, you know. I mean, if you fished 5 or 6 hours and nothing's happened, you know, and you need to take a break, take a break. If that's what it takes to get your confidence back, you know, sit down, eat a sandwich, hell, come in for a bit, take a nap, go back out.
Totally. You gotta reassess. If you don't have positive musky attitude, if you don't have a feeling that like every single time your lure's coming to the boat, you expect there to be a muskie behind it. If you're not feeling like that, you need to go sit in the shade for a minute, you know, walk around on a beach and have a long kind of reassessment of why you're out there and what you're doing.
Build a sandcastle.
Build a sandcastle. You know what we used to do? You know, when I was younger, we'd go out just crazy long days, and sometimes it turns into a long afternoon grind. We'd stop on a beach, and I'd stick my head under the water and have buddies like run different baits around me. I'd listen to them under the water. And there's nothing better than to reset yourself than getting in the water and being the fish for a little bit.
And that's also why I have a scar on my forehead.
Yeah, you know how I got these scars?
Exactly. There, 9-inch Suick, 1984. Oh, bad day. Well, I tell you, that is something that, you know, it's a big part of it. You know, reassessing the attitude, readjusting the attitude, and I, you know, again, I've spent years and, you know, most of my life in a boat, and having the right attitude and stuff while you're out there is a huge part of it. And like I said, if you gotta just take a break, you take a break. And if that's what it takes for you to get there, then that's what you do. But no, that's great. And before we end here, Joe, let me do one thing. Is you talked about some of the stuff like 10-inch jakes, 8-inch jakes that you like, even the Believers. Guys, I want you to check out Drifter Tackle. Guys, they've been a sponsor of the podcast and Muskie Road Rules for years. Check them out. You can go to drifter.net, Drifter Marine. You can go there and check that out as well. They make, I mean, it is absolutely amazing, some of the stuff that they have, the lines of lures and baits that they're coming out with. They have all the stuff from Senate Tackle. They have the stuff from the Believer, the original Drifter Tackle supply. They've got all the Muskie Mania products as well. Also the Loki series. They've got those. It's just amazing, all the stuff. Now, the other thing that they have is they've got nets, and I've been using their nets for a long time, and I really, really enjoy their nets, their Predator series, whether it's the XL or the double XL Predator. But check them out. It's driftertackle.net. A lot of nets here. They make nets, and it's .net. Remember that. So they
now, have they got their Jake lip thing figured out? Because there was a few years there where the Jake lips were weak, and I think that I think that they've got that figured out now, and they're kind of more, they're back to being strong again. But there was a little bit of time there where, you know, the lips just didn't. I mean, you wouldn't even touch a rock with them sometimes, and they'd break. But I think they got that straight.
I'm pretty sure they got that figured out. You know, with anything, there's a, with plastic, if you change the makeup or anything one little bit, you can hit a bad spot. But I know I use these baits a lot and beat them in the rocks, especially the newer ones, and have done. It seems to be holding up. Now, let's face it, guys. If you beat a plastic lip into the rock long enough, it's going to break. But yeah, that's kind of the game that you play with it. I've got a bag of lips here at the cabin that I can stick back in there and stuff. But guys, check them out, driftertackle.net. Joe, do you want? How can somebody get a hold of you if they want to go fishing? There's not too many. For me, I've always been a big urinal advertising guy, writing my name on the side of the rest stop urinals and stuff. There's not too many up here, so I got to figure out a new way to advertise. How somebody get a hold of you?
You can call me at 218-280-3734. I might answer. I'll probably be out on the water. Leave a message. Otherwise, you can check out my website. It's joecooperlotw.com. I'm pretty sure it's still up. It's probably a little outdated. My daily rates on there are definitely not what you're going to be paying. I need to update the website a little bit. But, joecooperlotw.com, 218-280-3734. Otherwise, just show up and wait on the dock until I come back, and we'll figure it out from there.
All right. And, guys, remember, muskiehunter.com. Check that out. We've got some pretty cool stuff. We got some new clothing that we're putting out. Also, we have the collectible lures, which you'll be hearing from here very shortly. I apologize. It's taking a little bit longer this year. We have them. It's going to be the Shallow Invader. Started in 1996 by Muskie Innovations. It's going to be the collectible lure for this year, so you guys get ready for that. Check your inbox, and you'll be getting your emails that you guys can pick yours up. And if you want to go fishing with me, and it's easy, just go to battleofthebeast.com. My website is updated, I think. That is a think there. It's also, I created it in GoDaddy, and I don't know what I'm doing. So at least we have that going for us. But, Joe, hey, we really appreciate you coming on. I am glad we got you on here, and we will definitely have you again, and we'll talk more about some of the Lake of the Woods stuff. But, hey, I appreciate you joining me this morning.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it, and we'll see you out there.
All right, we will.